الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. So today we have our, I believe, 8th Spark session now, alhamdulillah. So how many months does that make? 4 months, I think. So alhamdulillah, moving along. And now we've got Musa as our 7th presenter, I believe. Inshallah, take it away, Musa. تفضل. Barakallah.
All right, so my topic today is why Europe is truly more strategic than North America. I'll probably refer to North America as NA in some parts of the presentation, so that's just something to keep out. So, starting over here, basically, I got this idea from a documentary I was watching on this basketball player on the bottom left, as you can see. That's called Luka Doncic, and he's actually like one of like the best NBA players at the moment. And it was like a random video I saw on YouTube. And this guy basically made a statement where he said EuroLeague is actually harder than the NBA. And I was like, I've never even heard of the EuroLeague before, and I'm pretty sure most of you here might have not heard of it. Because when you think of basketball, you think, okay, NBA, that's probably the most popular thing that you're gonna know about basketball. And the statement is actually, it turned quite a few heads, and also there's a lot of other NBA players that backed it as well. Um, and this kind of got me thinking because it's not just basketball where I've noticed this. As you see here, it's also like chess. It could be football. It'll be like some esports games. It'll even be like infrastructure and those other things. So it's kind of like a common theme that I noticed just appears quite a lot. So the first thing I'm gonna bring up is EuroLeague versus the NBA. As I said before, you probably don't even know what the EuroLeague is. It's basically the same thing as the NBA with slightly different rules. The court's a little bit smaller. The rules are slightly more team focused. Like you have less space and you get more points for certain stuff, all that sort of stuff, right? And basically, this guy, this Luka Doncic guy that I was telling you about, and also this other guy on the right here, Giannis, and there's a few other NBA players. They mentioned this statement: EuroLeague's harder, and people are like, oh, why is it harder, bro? Because when you think of it, if you look at the NBA players, they have a lot more talent, they're more entertaining, and like just know about NBA more. But the thing is, actually, what makes it harder in Europe is that, first of all, as I mentioned, the rules are slightly different. And when the rules are slightly different, what it means is that, for example, like let's say someone's trying to make a play, because the court's a little bit smaller, it's a lot harder to have space. So you have to be more team focused. You have to be able to like pass it around a lot more rather than having a lot more space to do your own like play. And that's one thing that they mentioned. Another thing that they mentioned is that they play a lot more team focused. So as I mentioned at the bottom there, it's more coach slash team driven than star driven compared to the NBA. The NBA have much better players. I'm not saying that the players are worse, but because people in Europe play more as a team, it makes it so much harder for NBA players to play in Europe. And I found that really interesting because I've never heard of it before. Now, the second thing that I'm going to talk about, which I'm sure you guys all know about, are like many esports games. Now, this is something that I play a lot. I play a lot of FPS games. I'm sure people here have played it as well. Now, this is a really, really common theme in esports is that when you verse NA teams, which is like North American teams, versus like the top EU teams, the NA teams absolutely get destroyed. It's like a really common theme across a few different sports, esports. So like in CS, in Valorant, in Rainbow Six, those are the like three that come to the top of my head. I think even in pretty sure even maybe even in Rocket League, I'm not too sure. I haven't really looked into it, but you probably might see something similar like that. And it's just like, why is Europe always better than North America when it comes to this? Again, as I've mentioned, North America seems to have a lot better like entertainers. So the players there have a lot of individual skill and they're very entertaining to watch. So if you ever like go on Twitch, I don't know if you guys know what Twitch is. It's basically like a streaming service where a lot of people will stream like their gameplay or just like them doing like some artwork or something like that, right? It's like a streaming platform. A lot of the famous people on Twitch or like all these streaming services are all American people. There'll be like a lot of famous American esports players and all sorts of stuff. And those American players are actually really bad when they come to like tournaments, but they're really entertaining to watch and they have like a lot of like skills. You're like, why are they bad? Like it doesn't make any sense. And it's actually pretty funny because in CS:GO, a famous esports team called Evil Geniuses, they bought like three or four teams. They bought three or four of the biggest like NA teams in America, and they combined them to one massive like 15 man roster. And keep in mind that this was like worth millions at that time, and they couldn't win a single game against EU teams because they just consistently fell short, and it's just they just couldn't do anything about it. And I think the reason is because how NA teams generally tend to play. There are obviously a few exceptions, but the general sort of trend is that they are a lot more individual focused. So they'll be like, okay, this person, you just go kill everyone, and we'll just hope that you can, do your best. They don't really try to like coordinate plays together, and when they do, it's generally not that good. You've noticed. I know I don't think that many of you know CS:GO, so I'll explain a little bit about it. But basically, there was like this famous CS American team, and there was like this famous European team called Astralis, and Astralis has won like 7 years in a row. By the way, they won 7 years in a row of like the CS major, which you can see pictured at the back of the top right. That crowd is basically as big as it's massive. It's like sort of similar to, I guess, like a football crowd. Like it sounds similar to like a football crowd because they're very passionate and they cheer a lot and stuff. And anyway, so Astralis, 7 years in a row, and not a single person could beat them. And the reason why is because they're very innovative and the strategy was like insane, but also because they just played so well together. And when like the top one America team played against them in like the finals, they couldn't like properly kill it, like win a round because the way how they took a side. So basically, in CS:GO is that, or like any like FPS game, you have like two sides, and you have to just sort of like there's attackers and there's defenders. The attackers have to take control of like one of the sites and plant the bomb and then defend it or kill everyone to win. And the defenders have to prevent them from coming on or kill them before they come or defuse the bomb, right? Um, the attackers were couldn't like when it was like American team to attack, they couldn't successfully take one round off them because they were so bad when it comes to taking sides. And it's not just that American team; it's a lot of other American teams as well. And again, this is obviously because I say they rely more on individuals to step up and play rather than basing their entire game plans around it. Um, that's just esports, right? There are obviously many other examples. I know I was like pretty short on explaining like how the sites were taken. I wanted to show like a video to demonstrate it, like a really nice video, so it'd be really easy to understand. But I couldn't play a video. Ask a question. Uh, okay, I'll ask a question. Have any of you guys played CS?
Yes,
I have.
Okay,
Yes. I
so
mean,
you
how old
do
do you
understand
think
what
we
I
are,
mean.
Musa?
Okay, wait. So, okay, wait. That's a good question. So now when you play CS, right? Or like any FPS game, you think that a lot of it is to do to mechanics, right? Now,
no,
actually, no, it's not the case. Not the case at all. There's obviously mechanics. So like, for example, at any pro level, and I think this is like not just in esports, it's across like multiple different things. So like even in sports, the sort of skill level is kind of like the same. Obviously, there are exceptions, right? But the skill level generally is like, let's say it's over here, right? At this lower level, it's generally sort of the same. The things that make other teams stand out is how well they play together. And like in CS as well, it's very, very strat heavy. You have to have really, really good strategies to be able to win consistently. And these strats are really hard to make as well because it takes a lot of planning and a lot of understanding how your opponents play and knowing their weaknesses and trends and having a good economy, which basically means like keeping good track of like your money throughout the game so you don't um like be broke basically. Um and that's basically like all of these things that are like what EU teams do really well. And it's again I mentioned it's not just esports, it's multiple other different things. Now, just showing this here on the right is basically a list of like all the wins. For example, like in CS:GO, it's the same sort of thing in like Valorant. And as you can see here on the orange line, the last American win was in 2018. And before that, it was all like European team and some South American teams. And after that, it's all European teams and maybe like some South American teams. Now, onto chess. this is where I wasn't sure that there would be a huge correlation because initially I started off with the idea that it was basketball and then from basketball to esports. And I was like, wait a minute, chess might have something too. And actually it does. So looking at like one of the bullet points here, as of like the FIDE ratings in May, from the top 100 players in the world as of this last month, 57 are from Europe and 17 are from North America. Obviously, some people might say, "Oh, but chess was invented in like is more prominent in Europe and all that sort of stuff." But actually, it's like it's all about strategy, and there are a lot of like NA players that are really good. But the thing that makes the European players stand out more is, oh, there's a few things, right? One is that they generally tend to have a more aggressive play style. They're more adaptable, and they don't focus on memorizing moves all the time. They focus on like what their opponents are doing and then go from there. American players, so for example, you've probably heard of um, Hikaru. Have any of you heard of Hikaru?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Is he not Chinese?
Yeah, he's a Chinese guy. And then there's also Magnus Carlsen, which is like he's at the moment like one of the best chess players in the world.
Yeah.
And he's from Norway. But Hikaru is actually one of like the top NA players, and funnily enough, his play style is similar to that of a European player. He's really aggressive. A lot of the NA players tend to be more conservative, and they just memorize like lines. So to explain what that is, in chess, let's say you start off with a certain opening. So if I move my pawn to like d4, and they move their pawn to like I don't know d3 or something, right? Actually, probably not d3, but like d6, right? They move their pawn forward. Like those sort of set moves, they tend to generally like be memorized. So there's like specific openings that people do, and you memorize those sort of openings because some openings, like generally, right, those sort of plays are played thousands of times. So people sort of memorize like the best scenarios for those moves, and that's what NA players tend to do. They memorize like the best moves possible for like that sort of play, and when it gets to a point where like it deviates from that, you sort of struggle because they're not really as adaptable, and that's why EU players I tend to know be a bit better. Like there's a few examples I was gonna bring up about chess. There was like some really famous chess player called Gary Kasparov. I don't know if you guys know him, but essentially like there was like this massive game where it was like a 24 match game, and this it was like one of like the best matches in like I think the 90s or something. Yeah, it was a 1985 World Chess Championship, and basically Kasparov was on his he was like losing 6-5 I think, or was like or something like that, and he needed one win to stay in, and he was like losing. He was down a piece, and he was doing really bad at that time, at that point. So what he did was he sacrificed his queen to make like a play, and it ended up working out really well. And it shocked a lot of people because at that point he's doing really bad and he's struggling a lot, and he's probably gonna lose that game. Then he just sacrificed his queen out of nowhere. Like it's a bit crazy how he just decided to just throw out his queen like that. But actually, like it was like thought out properly, and it caught the person, and he ended up winning because of that. And it's kind of crazy how like even if you're that down bad and you're about to lose, you'll still play like you've got nothing to lose. Now it's a little off topic, but I was like thinking about this as well. There are many common themes where I've noticed that EU is slightly better than America when it comes to like strategizing things. And one thing that was a little off topic, but I saw this from YouTube. I saw like this guy talking about how London is better built, like better designed than um, America, like not New York, for example, like comparing London and New York. And there's a few different points that came up. I found it really interesting. So one thing was like public transport. So probably don't all agree with it, right? But the tube system and the public transport in London is probably like one of the best in the world. It's not the best. I think it ranks like 13th in the world, but it's really good compared to like a lot of other countries. New York have their own sort of public transport system. It's called the L. It's sort of like uh, metro, right? Sort of like our tube system. And if you compare both of them side by side, the TFL system in the Elizabeth line, yeah. The TfL system in London is way better than the metro system in New York. And there's a few different points because of that. One thing because of that is actually because the public transport system in London is really seamless. So I don't know if you guys have used it before, but if you go from like a tube to a bus, it's pretty like it's really well designed how it's so easy to go from tube to bus to even trams and things like that. And it makes it really easy to get to different places. But in New York, it's a bit less. So you just have like the L system, as far as I'm aware, and that's known to have a lot of issues. So there's a lot of congestion, and there's a lot of like traffic, and they don't really have a really good way to make it seamless as well. And it's just one sort of subway system. It's extensive, but it's criticized for its delayed, its lack of accessibility, and its overcrowding. Whereas, as I mentioned, public transport system is very seamless. Even though it might not seem like it, it is actually very seamless compared to New York. Um, Actually, the Elizabeth line is actually probably one of the best lines I've been on. It's it's amazing. If you've been on it, it's probably amazing. Now, the other thing is pedestrianization. So London have made lots of efforts to make it very pedestrianized. So, for example, Oxford Street, they're doing some pedestrianizing so that they're putting more effort on people walking, which is pretty cool. Even though New York has tried to do some things like that in Times Square, it's been a lot more of a limited scope compared to London. And the last thing, again, this is like slightly off topic, but I did find some correlation here, and I thought it'd be interesting to mention. It was also sustainability, like how London is a lot more sustainable. So, for example, the outrageous congestion charges, which are just terrible, that actually makes a big difference to the traffic. So that congestion charge made a huge difference in a lot of the traffic in London. And in New York, they have tried to reduce emissions and stuff like that, but they haven't really done any of like the stuff that London has done when it comes to like congestion charges and stuff like that. And that's essentially like the topic I had in mind today. Um, that's pretty much it. I just thought it was really interesting when I saw like a few videos and I was like, oh, these sort of things correlate. And I wanted to just talk about it. Any questions?
I've got a question.
Shoot.
But it's like pretty specific. You were talking about in the CS:GO one when Evil Geniuses took over like 15
Mhm.
players or whatever, and you said it costed millions. Do you know
A
how
million.
many millions?
I can't remember.
Okay,
I remember seeing a number somewhere, but I forgot to put it on.
okay.
But they had like 15 players, and at the time, um, two of those, there's like three different teams, and those teams were all like pretty good teams. But when you compare them to like Europe, right, they're terrible, but they were pretty good teams. They're worth quite a bit of money. So
Yeah,
also, it's not just the reason why they did that was because CS till now is probably one of the best esports to watch. Um, Even though it's not as popular as Valorant at the moment, it's a lot really popular to watch. And they have loads of prize money pools, and there's a lot of people watching them with lots of sponsors. There's a lot of money to be made from there. And America just tried a lot over the like past 5, 6 years. They tried a lot to get into it, but they've fallen short every single time because, well, one thing that a North American player did mention was that they wanted to boot camp in Europe, which means they wanted to like come to Europe and stay here for a while and play against European teams to see how they play and learn from them. But they couldn't do that because of some issues that came up with like moving and stuff like that. And that's kind of why they said they're not as good. But obviously, there's like a load of other things as well.
In some of
Anything else?
these sports and these teams, do we really get to see the American side versus the European side? Because like basketball, they never
Yes.
overlap. You're always
I
doing
mean, so another thing I was going to mention was football because you do see that overlap a bit. Um,
okay.
but then
British football, right? Not
yeah,
American
British
football.
football. Yeah, British football. Obviously not American football. I'm not going to say flipping soccer. But one thing that is I was going to mention, but the reason why I didn't mention it is because the argument is that football's a lot more popular in like South America and Europe than it is in America. But when you do compare how like American teams play football versus like any other team like in Europe, there's a big difference, and it's the same sort of trend I mentioned before. And I was gonna bring like a clip from a match to show what I mean. But it's again the very same sort of trend is that they focus a lot more on the individual play, and they don't really sort of strategize as much. when you watch like a football team here play, it's like a chess match with how they strategize and how they position and how well they take space and pass the ball around and make all these opportunities. When you watch like the game in America, it's not really like that. It's like they just try to just score and score and score, and there's no real effort to sort of strategize anything. It's just, oh, just give this guy the ball and see how well he can score and stuff like that. And that was like the same thing in America. Like if you watch NBA as well, you'll see that it's like 100 points versus like 90 points or something, and they're constantly just running like against each other to see who can like dunk the most points. But it's not really the case when you look at it like Europe and stuff like that.
Also, in esports, you do see a lot of overlap compared to actual
Oh,
sports.
a lot of overlap, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So-
in esports, right? Looking at just like Valorant, Rocket League, Rainbow Six, and like CS, they play at least once a year, at least, and they call those tournaments like the majors. And generally, like European teams have always won. If it's not a European team, it's like a South American team. In some esports, like some other esports, like League of Legends and stuff like that, you see some South Korean teams win, or like Chinese teams, but it's never an American team that will win. It's very rare that an American team will win an esports tournament, an esports like competition, or like a game.
So when it comes to esports, do you see that American people in general, do they hold more of the viewership than Europeans, even though the Europeans might
Yes.
win things more?
Yes. So, as I've mentioned, Europeans are not as fun to watch when compared to Americans. Americans are just generally more entertaining, and that's just it's not just in games, but it's also just generally as personalities as well. You'll see a lot of streamers that are American. You'll see like European streamers. You guys know what streamers are, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah. So
We're not 80 though.
We're still young, Musa. We're still young.
Yeah.
yeah, okay, but I'm just making sure. I'm just making sure. So streamers, right? In America, they're a lot more entertaining. They hold a lot more viewership than European streamers because European streamers just have no personality, or they're very boring, or they don't really get their humor. You know how like British people have very like sarcastic, dry humor compared to like American humor? It's sort of that sort of thing. Americans are generally just really a lot more entertaining to watch. So like in these esports I mentioned, the all these American players when they stream, they get like 30,000, 20,000 viewers. And you watch like a European player play, and like this is from one guy that won the tournament, the most recent tournament. I think he had like 1,000 viewers or something. It's just because Americans know how to entertain, and they're really fun to watch. But that doesn't mean that they're very good at games. It doesn't really correlate.
What about Allier?
Ali, relax, man. Relax, bro. That guy's old.
So, Musa, question.
Hmm.
If you had the choice, what would you be?
What would I be?
Would you rather be a North American fella or a European competitive winning all competitions kind of guy, or just, the big streamer on the platform? Would you want to be?
Streamer.
Going for fame.
If you
He
had to
makes
pick,
so
if
much
you had
more
to
You
money.
would get more money, it's
Yeah.
true.
Oh, a lot more money. If you had to pick between three of them, and also keep in mind, I generally do think that if you're not going to something tech related in the future, entertainment's a really good option if you can make it. Because obviously, with the advancements in AI and all that stuff, I think that a lot of jobs will be replaced. And I think entertainment is something that can never be replaced, as well as going into some roles in tech.
So,
So if you can make it as an entertainer, then go ahead, bro. You're gonna milk it.
so answering your question from the beginning of your slide, is Europe more strategic than North America? What's your answer?
Yes.
Europe is more strategic in terms of gameplay.
Not just gameplay. According to like a lot of the topics I mentioned, you can sort of agree that Europe is more strategic than America. I mean,
From
you can
Well,
compare.
from
You can.
a monetizing point of view,
Sorry,
in
from a
terms of making
monetizing
money.
from a monetizing point of view, I'm not sure about that. I haven't really looked into it, but the only thing I can say about that is that they're just more entertaining to watch. So if you look at streamers, entertainers, then they make more money. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure about like other parts of that. I mean, but it doesn't just apply to all the topics I mentioned as well, by the way. If you
Yeah.
think of anything that comes to mind, just look at look at like how Europe does compared to America and that. You might see the same sort of trend.
Oh, what about like just war?
Politics.
What?
War, battles, World War One, World War Two.
Yes. Oh, I was going to mention that as well.
It
Thanks
was the
for reminding.
Vietnam War. Let's talk about that mess up,
I mean,
isn't it?
there was like one thing that came to mind was politics and how politics are done in America and Europe. And I didn't really do much research into it, but I did remember reading that Europe again performed a lot better when it comes to like politics and how they organize all that stuff compared to America. I mean, America is a complete joke at the moment,
As if it's not a joke here, but yeah.
but it's a lot better here, I'd say, than America.
We're looking at the Europe as a whole, isn't it?
And Europe as a whole. Europe as a whole is way better than America. Like I don't even know why.
It's in the midst of a war, but you know.
Yeah.
Let's go Poland.
Okay, any other questions related?
Ammar had a question.
Oh God.
Okay, we'll leave Ammar's question for afterwards.
Yeah, please.
Anything else you want to add, Musa, before we end the recording? And then there'll be more questions and stuff.
Nothing.
Oh, that was recorded.
That was recorded.
Oops.